There's been a lot of controversy on Juno or Space Ranger's release, but it's all in the right ways. You see, the general impression of this character is that she's a lot of fun to play, just maybe a little bit underpowered, and the controversy is more from, okay, what does she actually need? I will say that my initial impression has definitely reflected the general player base, that maybe she's a lot of fun, but maybe a little clunky in some ways, needs a little bit of help. But my initial impression has shifted a little bit the more I've played her, and I actually feel like there may be some other options, more creative solutions about the character needing than what has generally been put out there. As it is, Juno is a very utility-intensive support with not a lot of dueling options. She has unique mobility, she has speed, she has ranged heal, and damage boost and ultimate. And we're gonna be going down, I have a whole list of notes here on exactly what these abilities do, not all the super detail oriented stuff, but exactly what you need to know about the abilities, how it affects playstyle, and maybe my suggestions about what that ability might need in the future. So let's break down the weapon first. The elephant in the room is that this ability cannot headshot, and that's been a big point of controversy. Some people are saying that she does need the headshot, it's a point of skill expression, and she desperately needs help in the dueling, which I honestly kind of agree with. I will say that Alec Dawson, in my recent interview with him, said that a lot of the things they're trying to do with support, they want to move a little bit away from the scrapper mindset where these supports are consistently out dueling DPS. However, that doesn't mean the supports need to be completely incapable of defending themselves. And she does have a lot of escape options. The question is, are these escape options comparable to something like a Kiriko, who can not only outduel you, but also just swift step away? Now, one thing that she does have is she has a lot of utility that may mean that, yeah, she doesn't have to duel because she has utility that she could provide to her team. Maybe even superior to Kiriko, but I think there could be a little bit of a middle ground there. Maybe she's too weak at defending herself, and maybe her escape options are there, but a lot harder to pull off and a lot less consistent. Frankly, overall, I'm really unsure on where I fall with a weapon. I think that adding a headshot might give some more skill expression and be a lot of fun to play with, maybe if we reduce the critical multiplier by a little bit. But I also do like the fact that it's unique, and I like the fact that almost the challenge of saying, hey, you're not allowed to give a headshot multiplier. How do you make this character defend herself? How do you make the character move around? Because a character like Ana was able to do so with high impact cooldowns like Sleep Dart and Nade. Can we consistently do that with Juno as well? And I actually think that we can. We just have to be really careful about how we do that. Doesn't mean I'm against headshot. I just think that it's a conversation that we need to have. I think it'll probably be internally tested in terms of whether they want to give it to her at all or not. We'll just have to honestly wait and see. I don't really think there's a convincing argument for either side. I can see the strengths and weaknesses. Not every support needs the capability to consistently duel and win every duel. I do have a solution potentially to this problem that is a little bit moving away from the weapon, but we'll get to that one in the torpedo section. In regards to the healing output, it's pretty good. No real complaints. It's a good ranged option. It requires aim. It does have fall off. The only thing I could say potentially is that maybe the audio feedback on actually healing somebody isn't super satisfying. Could be a little bit louder just to make sure that you actually know that what you're doing is actually working. But beyond that, I think the weapon is actually a really strong point. And also, can we just admire this amazing reload animation? Big shout out to my guy Kyle. Our shift here. So the shift here, I forget what it's called here. It's called the glide boost. So this is the big one. Like, there's been a lot of controversy, almost as much as the weapon, because there's no vertical mobility. You cannot fly with this, right? In fact, the only verticality you really get is from the double jump that she has. And oh yeah, she has a double jump, right? It's pretty cool. And she has a little bit of a hover mechanic as well. And utilizing these two, you can absolutely get some verticality here, which is great. But the problem is that a lot of people have expectations of free flight here in terms of escape options and repositioning, but she doesn't have those. The only thing that she really has here, I don't know if I'm going to be able to demonstrate this perfectly, and she has a very forgiving ledge catch mechanism like Genji Hanzo, where they can kind of like catch onto the ledge and walk over Kiriko as well. But she has it with her slides. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to demonstrate it here, but I can actually get up to here. So I'm gonna boom, flight, and I can kind of, I can almost get it. There, you see that right there? So if you catch a ledge, it will actually pull you up over. Now this is really interesting. If there is like an incline and that continues, you can actually glide along the edge and climb on the edge without actually walking onto the thing and get basically infinite verticality for at least as long as your shift lasts. So you can kind of like catch up over there. And that led to a lot of really interesting moments for me when I was playing this character, where I had the capability of climbing up a lot higher and escaping engagements that I didn't think I'd be able to escape from, just because I'd place it just perfectly and just catch the ledge. The bad news is that if you don't quite get that height, you're not getting away. And so there's been a lot of like kind of mixed feedback on whether she needs the free flight or not. I actually think that she doesn't. I see more arguments for headshot and some tweaks to torpedoes than I see for shift. I think it's a unique aspect to her mobility. I think it's what makes her separate from a lot of the other supports and from other free flight characters in the game. I will say that having some sort of descend option to pull yourself down faster, or to pull yourself down while you're holding free flight, you notice that I cannot descend here. that is a bit awkward. So being able to descend, if you'd like to, with your free flight would be actually, not free flight, with your glide boost would be really, really nice there. There have been a couple of other solutions and suggestions as well. I have heard a lot of suggestions, even something that I thought of from my own Twitch chat, where people were saying, what if we allowed her to reset her double jump when you glide boost? You could double jump and then glide boost and double jump again. I'm on the fence with this one. I think it's an interesting idea to test, but I actually think that it would basically give her, I won't say infinite verticality, but it would essentially give her all the verticality to the point to where she doesn't really have any verticality limitations, which I think would remove part of the aspects and make her unique. So I'm going to say reserving judgment. I'm not as sold on it as I was before, because it essentially just says, oh, well, you actually do have a lot of verticality, and I don't know. I will say my biggest complaint with glide boost is kind of just vague, where it just feels kind of, outside of the little ledge catch there, it's kind of aimless. It doesn't really have anything that makes it unique. It's just speed. It's like Soldier Sprint, but on a cooldown. It only lasts 4 seconds, which is actually a pretty long time, and you can use other abilities while you're doing that, which is nice, but it's not particularly unique or creative or clever outside of that ledge catch. It's just speed. It's great for rolling out from spawn. It is good in sustained fights, but there's not a lot of creativity in how it's used. Maybe there's an argument here where you could reduce the duration, but have like a little kick, right? So like, you guys know how with Echo, you can cancel her flight initially and get that big boost of momentum. Let me show you guys. So you can do this here. Instead of just pressing flight, I can go bam and jump cancel, and I just go flying. Maybe there's something where you can give Juno a little bit of an initial burst of mobility, so if you want to cancel the ability sooner. I'm not really sure. I think there's a lot of things to unpack here. It is just a slightly odd mobility that I think is something at least worth considering. The big thing I think is that 100% needs to descend if you'd like to. Okay, moving on to the speed ring here. And oh boy, there's just so much to talk about with this character. It is a projectile. The projectile itself also gives the speed boost. So as it's moving through, or you are near targets, even if the speed ring hasn't deployed yet, it actually does give speed boosts before it even deploys, which is kind of interesting. Obviously, you don't actually need to even go through the ring to get the speed boost as well, so I'm gonna wait for my speed boost. We'll talk about that in a second. But like, just even moving near it gives you speed boost, even if I don't necessarily go through it. It's really, really cool. The other thing to point out as well, which you guys probably saw there, is that, and this is a huge part of her design, is that I don't actually need the ring myself to get the benefit from it. You see? I'm getting the speed boost. Now, I'm not sure if that's an intended mechanic in terms of, oh, it went near me, or it's just I always get it, or what. But Juno gets the speed boost when you deploy the speed ring, even if the speed ring isn't near where you are. And that's super huge. That opens up a lot of options where Juno can use it for herself and still support the rest of her team. That opens up a ton of options, and it's super, super, super interesting. Obviously, speed as a utility is a tricky one. It is hard to find value out of consistently in non-coordinated environments because it's not always immediately obvious that it's helping. And I think that's the key thing here. The big issue is that ranked players may struggle with finding its value palpable, even though it actually is. In tank trades, DPS trades, even just for strafing, moving, pushing, pulling, getting an advantage and pushing it, getting a disadvantage and kiting it, you could give I oftentimes was giving my tank speed boost, even if he or she wasn't even calling to push, just because having that as a tank really is actually nice to avoid disadvantageous HP trades. If I'm Ryan, I can push it. Oh no, I'm losing a little bit of HP. I can immediately disengage during the duration of the speed boost. Helps Zarya. It even helps characters like Sigma to swing wide to make them a little bit harder to shoot. The speed is almost always an advantage for the target that it's given to. It just may not be immediately palpable. I actually don't have a lot of problems with speed ring, with one exception. The big issue is the range of the ring. Juno is a hypermobile character, very broad, very wide, has decent range with her weapon, but the problem is, when you talk about the limitations, I'm going to show it to you guys real quick here. I think it's 12 meters or something like that. Yeah, it's like 13 meters, right? And that's just not good enough. And by the way, it can deploy in midair, which is cool. It's just not anywhere near good enough. It needs to be at least 20, maybe 25 meters in range, and it needs to be something like an Orisa shield, where if I want it deployed, you guys remember Orisa shield, right? You deploy it at the ground, and it deploys at the ground. Obviously, if it doesn't hit an object for so many meters, it deploys in midair. That's great. But the problem is that if I want to take an angle that's longer than 12 meters, I'm not going to be able to speed boost my team, or speed boost a DPS, or anything else like that. And Juno's kit doesn't complement sitting in the back line behind your tank. Her kit's way more involved and way more demands a lot more mobility, a lot more creativity with positioning. Characters like Baptiste and Ana, even Zenyatta, have a lot more impact with what's directly in front of them. Juno is just not very good at that. So she has to move, but then you have a speed ring that can't reach the people that you want it to reach you. It's super unintuitive, and it's one of the two changes that I think this character unequivocally has to have. Like, no arguments this character has to have this change. Otherwise, the speed ring is going to feel very, very lackluster and pretty much just selfishly used or selflessly used standing behind a tank, which is just going to be a really, really bad playstyle with the character of this kit. So anyway, I love the speed ring and execution with everything except that one thing here. Now let's talk about torpedoes here. Boy, this is a big one to unpack here. So let's talk about this. So the torpedo is lock-on healing and damage, does 75 damage. You release it or press it, does 75 damage, and it is avoidable. Now, in my testing, I think you can actually strafe it. I might be wrong with that, someone might correct, like you could actually juke it. I'm 99% sure that you can avoid it with a movement ability like a dash or a blink. It will miss. And then the obvious one is you could just duck behind a wall. Like, it will hit the wall. It doesn't track really well, which I think is great. Like, it gives a lot of counterplay. If you do get locked on, you can't avoid it. It's not a lot of damage, but you can't avoid it. And then the big thing here is the healing. So the healing is the big part, because it does not only initial heal, but then, as you see there, a sustained heal over time, which is actually fairly significant. And this is the strongest aspect of the torpedoes, is the heal over time right now. Other couple of interesting things as well, it does lock on to targets that are closer faster. You can see it locks onto those guys a little bit slower, so that's worth knowing for both damage and healing. And the other thing as well is that you can use some of your abilities while you're doing it. You can obviously jump. I don't know if you can ultimate at the same time. I haven't tested that one out, but you cannot speed boost ring, but you can shift. Now, the big one is the elephant in the room. I keep saying that, for me anyway. And you cannot use your weapon while you're locking on with torpedoes. Now, I know some people are like, oh, that's good. That's, it's balanced. You can't shoot and torpedo at the same time. But the problem is that right now torpedoes are almost exclusively used for sustain and a little bit of AoE pressure, although it's not very good at that. That's bad. If we want to talk about giving this character the ability to defend herself in a relatively skillful and risk versus reward way, I think you need to allow her to use the torpedoes while she's using her weapon. So in other words, I can use my torpedoes and continue to fire at the same time. Now, you might be thinking, oh, it's just free damage. You could just win every duel. Well, no, actually, because the key thing is that it is such a powerful sustain cooldown that if you use it to do an extra 75 damage in a duel, then all of a sudden you don't have your most powerful, arguably, sustain cooldown for the rest of your team and your most powerful AoE pressure for the rest of your team as well. In addition for that, the torpedoes are avoidable and is still a relatively small aspect. It's something that increases APM and encourages you, like an Ana grenade. Do I want to use this to defend myself, or do I think I can get away? Or what if I get away and try to use the torpedoes for my team? What if I die? Okay, wait, I'm gonna use it to defend myself, but I missed my shots and I died anyway, or I did hit the shots and I forced equivalence and got away, but now I don't have to sustain to keep my team alive. There's a lot of risk reward if we were to incorporate it this way. The problem as it is right now is torpedoes is never worth using in a 1v1. Never, 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 with one exception, with characters that are either a little bit very slippery, or characters that are currently using invulnerability cooldowns and that you're waiting for that vulnerability cooldown to expire, like a deflect. But beyond that, it's just never worth using because the damage of a simple clip of your gun does more damage. And it also requires you, you can do a lot more damage. Now, the funny thing here as well, if we're talking about breakpoints here, this is something I tested on stream. I'll show you guys really quick. The other thing with Torpedo is it actually, the amount of damage that it does, while it's appropriate, it doesn't change breakpoints. Watch. 1, 2, 3. Just barely gets that with a third clip. That's great. Awesome. I think it's 252 damage. Watch this. 1, 2, and this is crucial because not only does Torpedo not do a lot of damage, but it doesn't change the break point for 250 characters. You still have to hit 3 clips. I understand that lock-on weapons are like something that we have to be really cautious about. That's why I really am careful to not give it more damage, nor to make the torpedoes faster or harder to avoid. I think it's perfect as it is. Even some of the characters that she will be dueling, a lot of these Genjis and Tracers, have much better tools to actually deal with the torpedoes than the other thing. They have the deflect, the movement abilities to avoid it entirely, and so on. The question is I think, will allowing you to use your weapon during the lock-on open up more choices, give more flexibility in how you can use it without allowing her to just headshot and just that being the buff? I think the answer is yes. I think this is the more creative and clever way of using the ability, and I think that if I were to ask for any buff to allow her to defend herself more, it would be from this. It actually opens up so much choice. I don't think the auto lock is a problem necessarily. Now, I've seen a couple of suggestions as well. I've seen people say that you have to like actually track the target for it to lock on just briefly, like lock on like this, like lock, 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 lock. Like you have to put your crosshair on the target. It's kind of like one of those old Jurassic Park arcade games. I think that would be kind of a cool idea as well. Maybe something to do. But I really like this ability. The lock on, getting these multi hits is just so satisfying. Feeling your sustain and a little bit of damage here and there, like just over the course of the entire battlefield, just feels awesome. One other little thing as well, I don't think I would necessarily change this, but like one slightly weak thing about torpedoes is there's no such thing as a partial torpedo. So like letting go there, it doesn't do anything, right? If it's not fully locked, it doesn't do any healing, it doesn't do any damage. So anyway, I don't know what you guys think about that one. I've been putting a lot of thought into this one. The more I use it in duels, the more I use it in team-wide abilities, I'm just thinking, man, if I could shoot my weapon with this, it would be amazing. One change that would need to happen if they did that is they would have to nerf the initial burst heal. Check this out. Bam, right? That burst heal is pretty significant, plus the heal over time. So you would not want that to be used while I could also heal my team while I'm locking on them with torpedoes. So you would need to nerf the initial burst heal. Otherwise, I think the sustain from the torpedoes would be too strong, which would be ironic because now we're back in the same spot where it's basically just used as a healing ability. Last thing here, the ultimate. It's definitely an oddball. It's fun to use because I actually do damage with it. The 30%, I believe it's around 30% damage boost is actually nice because it feels like I can actually put out punishment now. Problem is it's by the way, it looks sick, right? But it's just a little odd to use in terms of it feels a little slow for a character that moves this quickly. Now, I don't necessarily know if I want it to go faster because it just moves away from you. I thought about situations where like having it stay on Juno would be interesting, but I don't know if that would just make her just immediately targeted and just immediately blow up. That might just mean that it rewards Juno just for using it and hiding behind cover and letting her team get value. That would not be what we want. So I don't know. This one's really tricky. One thing that I can say for sure is the perceived value of this ultimate's a little bit hit or miss. It doesn't feel super great to be boosted by this ultimate. It feels a little bit like a damage boost from a Mercy Beam, which you definitely feel it a little bit, but it's not super palpable. Like, this is a pretty big deal to be getting with this ultimate. The healing, the damage boost, it's pretty significant, but it doesn't feel like it. And actually, the biggest problem is the enemy Juno. I don't know if she's just too cute or what, but like, I've literally, a lot of my quick play and pugs, I was like, guys, she's ulting, we need to back up. It doesn't sound scary. A lot of the ultimates in Overwatch, they will have the enemy ultimate sounds a little bit more intense, a little bit more ferocious, and has like various audio cues to let you know that, hey, this is a dangerous thing. You need to be careful. And it is a dangerous thing. Juno and her team with this is dangerous, but it doesn't sound dangerous, which often leads to people just fighting into it and just dying and not knowing exactly why they're dying, even though there's this big giant circle. So like, again, we want to make this intuitive. I think there could be slightly, maybe not the voice line, but the way it's delivered could be a little bit more intense. Maybe there's like more negative audio cues about like, hey, watch out. It just needs to sound more scary playing into, because it is scary. Okay, so anyway, we'll wrap this up. Key thing is this hero has a ton to unpack. There's a lot of knobs to turn, which is great. So there's all sorts of little balance tweaks that we can do. And it scales really, really well with practice. I lost a lot of games playing this character. I played, I don't even know how many games, maybe 30, 35 games. I played, like I said, 10 hours. And I lost a lot of games, but it was fun. Like, I actually had so much fun playing this character. There were very few circumstances where I didn't have fun. I think playing into snipers was kind of bad. Maybe we'll talk about that in another video. But the mechanical ceiling right now really comes from hitting the base floor of, like, you need to hit your shots for your damage and healing. Like, it has to be done. But once you get to that point, a lot of it is, how do I use my abilities? And then a frankly really complicated decision about like, how do I position? Like, positioning with this character is really, really hard because there's so many choices, and there's also a lot of punishment if you make the mistake. So the utility movement is fairly fluid. I feel like some of the clunkiness complaints comes from people people having unrealistic expectations, expecting free flight, right? I will say that I definitely feel that she is a little bit underpowered right now. I do not feel like that she is on the safe side of strong at all. I don't think this is a life weaver by any means, but I think she's going to be outperformed by most supports, especially considering that she is so hard to pick up, which is in a way good, but in a way bad. I think leaving her on the safe side of strong, maybe overperforming for people that are really good at her, and then scaling her back as people get more comfortable with her. Otherwise, we might have a wrecking ball situation where people just don't play the character for a long period of time, despite the character being pretty good, because she's so freaking hard to play. And I think that would be a shame with this character. So I think we need to be thoughtful and very specific and precise with what buffs that we give her. but I think she's not quite on the safe side of strong right now. So what do you guys think? I think this is honestly just a huge what do they say, feather in the cap of the Overwatch 2 development team. I've been critical of a lot of the Season 11 changes in terms of patch notes and so on. Especially the recent mid-season patch, but honestly, this hero is so much fun. Even if you're not popping off with this character all the time, it just, the APM, the engagement required is just almost second to none. It felt like I was playing Genji or Tracer again. I felt like I was playing Ana again. I just like constantly had to be locked in, and that might appeal to everybody. I feel the fact that she also is maybe not quite as mechanically demanding. It felt actually like, it felt like a cool mixture of like a flanker plus mercy movement. I don't know. There's something to unpack in there, but she just feels totally unique, and I really enjoyed playing her. A lot of fun, no complaints. If you guys didn't get a chance to play her, I feel sorry for you. You guys have to wait for the new release. She rocks.